This is the Acer Nitro 5, typically a more budget-friendly laptop in the gaming laptop space. However, this one sports a Ryzen 9 5900HX and an RTX 3080. Now, putting high-end components in a cheap chassis is like putting a sports car engine into a cheap vehicle and will be something I would typically avoid. But this second-hand one was priced too good of a deal to pass up, so hopefully it's not a complete lemon. The first bit of concern is already showing up. The power supply is only rated at 180 watts. Now, the RTX 3080 Mobile can draw over 150 watts in some laptop models, but obviously that's not going to happen here. I suspect this would be a max-Q or low power version, though Nvidia doesn't use that naming anymore. The laptop itself was pretty filthy out of the box. That's a feature of second-hand shopping. You never know how clean it will be. I always give the product a good wipe down whenever I sell something second-hand, but evidently not everybody does. After disinfecting the machine, we can have a good look at what we've got. Other than the dirt and grime, it's in fairly good nick. Some light scratches and wear, especially on the touchpad, but no real damage or defects. It's a very plasticky build, definitely a budget design chassis. RGB keyboard just so everyone knows you're a gamer. Typing feels okay, maybe a little cramped, maybe something that you need to get used to, but I'm not very knowledgeable in keyboards, so take that opinion for what it is. And the touchpad is pretty good too, no issues there. The screen is a QHD 165Hz 3ms response time IPS display, which I think is the sweet spot for mid to high-end gaming laptops. 1080p is serviceable on a 15-inch laptop, but the extra sharpness of 1440p is appreciable, and 165Hz is more than enough for most people playing esports titles. It doesn't appear to have a mux switch, so we're losing some performance by having to go through the integrated graphics. For I/O, we got in Ethernet, two USB 3s, and a headphone microphone jack on the left side. The right side has a USB-C, which looks to be just for data, so no display functionality. Another USB 3, and HDMI. It's not a great spot to have HDMI, since it will interfere with the mouse if you have it right next to the laptop. The rear has just the power input. So not terrible, but not fantastic I/O selection. Now we can have a look at the specs. CPU is a Ryzen 9 5900HX, an 8-core 16-thread mobile CPU. For memory, we've got 32GB DDR4 at 3200MHz in dual channel configuration. That's good, at least we know the memory won't cripple the performance. We've got not one, but two 1TB NVMe SSDs and an RTX 3080 8GB. Okay, so I'll be trying an out-of-the-box experience first. So that's just with the latest Windows update installed. Fans are quite annoying. It's quite loud, but worse that it's at an irritating frequency. I'm using Shadow the Tomb Raider in-game benchmark as a reference. So what I found was the GPU would go up to 100 watts and sat around the mid-80s centigrade. The CPU was pegged basically at 91 degrees. It appears to be thermal throttling way below the rated 105 degrees Celsius that the Ryzen 9 can go up to. I found that the laptop had a fan boost mode in the NitroSense application. This made the fans unbearably loud, but I wanted to see if it helped. And it did. GPU temps lowered to the mid to high 70s, and while the CPU was still 91 degrees, the clock speeds were much higher than what it was before. I'm an idiot and forgot to record the first results, but the average here was 77. I also used 3D Mark Demo to get a score. Even with the boosted fan, it scored way below the average score of this configuration. Now I'm going to open it up and see what condition we have on the inside. The fans are stuffed with dust. That would explain the throttling. I'm skipping over the cleaning and reposting process. This isn't a guide, so you probably should look up someone more competent than me if you're trying to do something like this yourself. Much better. The tape between the fan and heatsink is a bit worse for wear, but shouldn't be an issue. So let's get back into 3D Benchmark and see how this improves the score. And it helped a bit. The graphics score is also slightly improved too, but the CPU score is substantially increased. Now at 1995, that's a bit over 15% increase in score. We can also see that the CPU isn't constantly at 91 degrees, and the GPU temps are much nicer, around 10 degrees lower. Now back to Shadow of the Tomb Raider. On AutoFan, we get 1 extra frame per second compared to the previous test. Setting it to max fan gets us an additional frame per second, but you'll have to put up with the laptop sounding like a wailing banshee. The GPU really is bottlenecking the CPU, even if the CPU is being throttled by the 91 degrees thermal limit. Now, stupid me forgot to update the graphics driver before initial testing, so I did it for both the integrated and dedicated GPU, and the results improved measurably. 84 FPS on autofans. I wanted to really push it, so I also added a stand to allow better airflow, and for the first time the CPU wasn't hitting that 91 degrees temperature, but it only increased the frame rate by 1 FPS, so I expect it's really GPU bound in performance. So I guess this is the best it gets. I'll try a few more games to see what kind of performance I can get. This will be on normal fan and just on the table since it's the more comfortable arrangement, even if a little bit of performance is left on the table. Note that my capture card only records 1080p, but the games were running at 1440p, so you'll need to use your imagination to make up for the lack of pixels. Deathloop runs quite smoothly on Ultra preset with some tweaking to my preference, and above 60 FPS experience with decent 1% and 0.1% lows too. Quality DLSS for 1440p, and you get an above 60 FPS experience, though there are some fluctuations which will occasionally bring it below that. Doom Eternal on Nightmare graphics preset gives an above 100 FPS experience at 1440p. The 1% and 0.1% lows are quite low compared to the average, but it didn't feel too bad, so I don't think it's really an issue. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition on Ultra preset at 1440p quality DLSS with ray trace reflections, hairworks, and advanced physics all on since we're running NVIDIA. It gets an average of 60 FPS just running through the cutscenes and a bit of the opening part of the game. It does dip below 60, so either dropping some graphical settings or changing to balanced DLSS may be the better way to play this. Finally, Portal RTX. To get a pretty good experience, you need to turn DLSS to auto, which is choosing the ultra performance option, and set the ray tracing settings to the lowest. This allows a 60 FPS experience at 1440p. The 1% low is good too. The 0.1% is really low, but I think it's the brief loading between the areas that is messing that up. Playing on ultra performance DLSS on a 15-inch screen isn't too bad, but if you were running on a larger display like an external monitor, it definitely doesn't look great. Far worse than the setting just above it, which is performance DLSS. With DLSS off and ray tracing settings set to ultra, we get 7 to 8 FPS, but look at the ray trace light on that cube. I was half expecting the Nitro to be a hot mess with high temperatures and horrible throttling. The fact that they throttle the CPU at a lower temperature might not be a bad thing. The longevity is probably increased and the thermal throttling on the CPU isn't really impactful because the power limited GPU. However, more CPU intensive games and applications will suffer due to it. In 3D Mark, the laptop is a bit under 80% of the average. This is a synthetic benchmark, so how does it compare with real games? Well, that will require me to retest with a high-spec RTX 3080 laptop. So it's a good thing I have this Legion 7 with the same CPU and a 165-watt RTX 3080 with 16GB of VRAM. In 3D Mark, the Legion scored above the average, so we'll be able to compare a high-power equivalent laptop to the Nitro. Note that these benchmarks aren't recreations of the last playthroughs, but are from the same locations in the games, so take them as an approximate comparison. Deathloop sees a massive 35% increase in the average frame rate, with a slight improvement in 1% lows, though the Nitro had a better 0.1% low. The game did stutter a bit on the Legion near the end of the test, not sure why, but it appears to have impacted the last value. Doom Eternal saw a staggering 84% increase in the average frame rate and a 135% increase in the 1% low. Recalling gameplay on the Nitro, while it was perfectly fine, it does feel smoother on the Legion. The 0.1% low is again ahead in the Nitro, not by much, and it's clear overall the Legion absolutely stomped the Nitro. I would guess this is partially due to the mux in the Legion, the Nitro needing to go through the integrated AMD GPU to the laptop display potentially impacted the high frame rate of Doom Eternal. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition saw a relatively mild at 24% increase in average FPS and an 11% increase in 1% low, with marginal difference in 0.1% lows. The difference in performance could best be described as the Legion being comfortably above 60 FPS and would handle the tough scenes, while the Nitro was about 60 though would drop during those more difficult scenes. Portal RTX was a 35% increase in average, though the Nitro beat it in the 1% lows by about 60%. I had noticed stuttering when new things were being loaded in on the Legion, which was not present in the Nitro, so I think that's the source of the lower 1% lows in the Legion. The 0.1% low is ruined by the loading between test chambers as previously mentioned, so I'm disregarding it. So the product is not bad, but it is misleading. There's no indication that the CPU throttles at 91 degrees or that the GPU is limited to 100 watts when you buy this. The performance difference is substantial in every game tested. The cynic in me would say this product exists to trick those less tech-savvy buyers into buying what appears on paper a high-end gaming laptop. One may assume that this performed near that of competing premium laptops, but with less bells and whistles, but this isn't the case at all. I would guess a properly cooled and high TDP Ryzen 7 RTX 3070 laptop will beat this in performance. If you see one of these being sold either new or used, you should be aware of its reduced performance. But if the price is right, then it may be worth considering. However, if you were expecting the same performance as a premium Ryzen 9 RTX 3080 laptop, then you'll need to keep looking. That's my thoughts on this Nitro 5 gaming laptop. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, leave a comment, and thanks for watching.